Victoria Hayes threw her champagne glass against the hull of her $40 million yacht. Glass exploded across the dock. 3 senior marine engineers flinched. "3 of you," she said, her voice cutting through the Miami humidity like a blade, "and not one can fix a simple engine." A man stepped forward from the shadows. Oil-stained uniform, calloused hands, quiet eyes. "Who the hell is this?" Victoria demanded. "Marcus Webb, former NASA propulsion engineer. Started yesterday." Victoria laughed, cold, cruel, deliberate. "A rocket scientist fixing boats. Fine. Fix this engine and I'll marry you. Deal." He looked at her for 5 long seconds. Then he said deal. Neither of them knew that single word would change everything. Comment your city below. Let's see how far this story travels. The champagne glass had cost $300. Victoria Hayes didn't care. She'd thrown it the same way she threw everything, with precision, with purpose, with the absolute certainty that someone else would clean up the mess. "Ma'am, the diagnostic system shows 17 different error codes. I don't want error codes. I want my yacht running." The senior engineer, 22 years of experience, certified by 3 maritime boards, took a step back. "We've been working on it for 6 hours. The electrical system is completely what? Broken, confused, tired." Victoria's heels clicked against the dock as she stepped closer. "I pay you people enough to buy houses, and you're telling me you can't start an engine?" "The hybrid system is extremely complex, Ms. Hayes. The integration between the diesel generators and the electric—" "I know what I bought. I signed the check. What I want to know is why 3 men who call themselves engineers can't make it work." Silence. The Miami sun beat down on the harbor. Somewhere in the distance, a boat horn sounded. The harbor master cleared his throat. He was 63 years old, had seen every kind of rich person walk through this marina, and knew better than to get involved. But the man standing behind him had asked for a chance, and something about him said he'd earned it. "Ms. Hayes," the harbor master said, "I might have someone who can help." "Another genius." Victoria didn't turn around. "Send him over. Let's see him fail too." "This is Marcus Webb, former NASA propulsion engineer. He started with us yesterday." Victoria turned then, slowly, the way a predator turns when it hears something moving in the brush. Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the dock. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3". His uniform was already stained with grease from the morning's work. His hands were rough, calloused, the hands of a man who'd spent decades building things that mattered. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Quiet, steady, completely unimpressed. "NASA," Victoria repeated. "You designed rockets, and now you're fixing boats in Miami. That's quite a career trajectory." "Life happens," Marcus said. "Does it?" She walked toward him, each step deliberate. "Or did you happen to life? Did you screw up? Get fired? Sleep with the wrong person's wife?" The 3 senior engineers shifted uncomfortably. The harbor master looked at the ground. Marcus didn't move. "None of the above." "Then why are you here? Why is a man who built engines for spacecraft standing on my dock in a uniform that costs less than my breakfast?" "Because this is where I need to be." Victoria laughed. It was the kind of laugh that had ended careers, dissolved partnerships, sent grown men to therapy. Sharp and cold and absolutely merciless. "You know what, fine." She spread her arms wide, gesturing at the yacht behind her. "The Sovereign, $40 million, twin V12 engines, hybrid electric system, the best marine technology money can buy, and it won't start." She stepped closer to Marcus. Close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something expensive. Something designed to intimidate. "Fix this engine," she said, her voice dropping to something almost intimate. "And I'll marry you. Deal." The 3 engineers chuckled nervously. Someone on a nearby boat whistled. Victoria's smile was all teeth and no warmth. She expected him to stammer, to blush, to back away and mumble something about how he'd do his best. That's what people did when she pushed them. They crumbled. Marcus Webb looked at her for 5 seconds. His expression didn't change. His breathing didn't quicken. He simply stood there, absorbing her challenge the way a mountain absorbs rain. Then he said, "Deal." The word hung in the humid Miami air. Victoria's smile flickered. Just for a moment. Just enough to notice. "Well then," she said, recovering quickly. "I'll be at the Ritz. I expect a call when you've given up." She turned and walked away. Her heels clicked against the dock. Her assistant scrambled to follow. A black Mercedes appeared at the end of the pier. Marcus watched her go. Then he turned to the harbor master. "I'll need access to the full electrical schematics, and about 8 hours. You sure about this, son? That woman eats people for breakfast." Marcus was already walking toward the yacht. "Then I'll make sure not to be breakfast." Ted. Victoria Hayes learned to build walls before she learned to build a company. Her father, Richard Hayes, started Hayes Maritime when she was 7 years old. One boat, one contract, one man's refusal to fail. By the time Victoria graduated high school, Hayes Maritime had a fleet of 40 vessels and contracts across 3 continents. She went to Wharton. Not because she wanted to, because her father told her she had to earn it. "Nobody respects a princess," he said. "They respect someone who can look at a balance sheet and see the future." She graduated top of her class. Her father died 6 months later. Heart attack. Massive. Instant. He was on the phone with her when it happened, arguing about a contract in Singapore the way they always argued. Then silence. Then the sound of the phone hitting the floor. Victoria flew home for the funeral. The board of directors met her at the airport. They offered their condolences. They also offered to buy her out. "Your father built something remarkable." The chairman said, his voice smooth with practiced sympathy. "But running a company like this requires experience, maturity. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable with a generous settlement and the freedom to pursue your own." "I'm not selling." "Ms. Hayes, with all due respect, you're 23 years old. The shipping industry is—" "I know exactly what the shipping industry is. My father taught me everything he knew. I spent every summer on his boats, every holiday in his office, every dinner table conversation about contracts and logistics, and the 1,000 ways this business can kill you." She stood up. She was 5'6", wearing a black dress, her eyes still red from crying on the plane. But something in her voice made the entire board go silent. "I'm not selling," she repeated. "And I'm not stepping aside. If you want to fight me, fight me. But understand this, I will destroy anyone who tries to take what my father built." The chairman looked at the other board members. Then he smiled. The kind of smile that meant he was already calculating how to remove her. It took Victoria 2 years to fire him. 2 years of board meetings where every decision was questioned. 2 years of whispered conversations that stopped when she entered the room. 2 years of being underestimated, patronized, dismissed. She learned to fight. Not with anger. Anger was a weakness. She fought with information, with strategy, with the cold precision of someone who understood that business was war and mercy was defeat. By 25, she controlled the board. By 27, Hayes Maritime had doubled in size. By 28, she married Jonathan Pierce. Jonathan came from old shipping money. His family had been moving cargo across oceans for 4 generations. The wedding made the cover of Forbes. "Maritime royalty," the headline read. Victoria thought she'd found a partner, someone who understood the weight of legacy, the price of success. Someone who could stand beside her without trying to stand in front of her. She was wrong. She found them in her office. Her office. The room where her father's portrait hung on the wall, watching over the desk where he'd built his empire. Jonathan, her CFO. On that desk. Victoria didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't throw anything. She simply said, "You have 30 seconds to get out, then I'm calling security." The divorce was brutal. Jonathan's family had lawyers who'd been destroying people since before Victoria was born. They tried everything, leaked stories to the press, dug through her past, painted her as cold and controlling and impossible to love. The tabloids ate it up. Ice Queen loses her king, ran the New York Post. Hayes heiress too cold for love, asked People magazine. Victoria won. She always won. But winning left scars. She stopped dating, stopped trusting, stopped believing that anyone could want her for anything other than her money, her power, her name. She threw herself into work with the fury of someone drowning, expanded into Asia, acquired 3 competitors, built Hayes Maritime into the largest privately held shipping company on the East Coast. The board loved her. The employees feared her. She told herself that was enough. At night, alone in her penthouse overlooking Biscayne Bay, she'd stand at the window and watch the lights of the city. And she'd wonder when the glass around her heart had stopped being armor and started being a prison. Marcus Webb's story moved in the opposite direction, from the sky to the sea, from building things that touched the stars to fixing things that floated on water. He met Elena at NASA. She designed life support systems for the International Space Station. He built propulsion systems for deep space probes. They met in a cafeteria, argued about thermal dynamics, and fell in love somewhere between the coffee machine and the exit. They married young, bought a small house in Clear Lake, Texas, near the Johnson Space Center, talked about having 3 kids and a dog, and maybe someday watching one of their designs land on Mars. Sophie came early, 2 months premature, 2 pounds, 3 ounces. A heart that didn't work right. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome, the doctor said. The words sounded clinical, detached, like they were describing a mechanical problem rather than a baby girl who'd just entered the world. The left side of her heart is severely underdeveloped. She'll need a series of surgeries, the first one within the next few days. Elena was still in recovery from the C-section. She was weak, but she held Sophie for exactly 7 minutes. Marcus counted every one. "She's a fighter," Elena whispered. "Look at her. She's already fighting." The complications started that night. Hemorrhaging. The doctors couldn't stop it. Elena died at 3:47 a.m., with Marcus holding her hand and the heart monitor playing its final note. He held his daughter for the first time in one arm. He signed his wife's death certificate with the other. The funeral was small. Elena's parents flew in from Michigan. Marcus's mother came from Ohio. They stood in a cemetery in Houston, while a priest said words that Marcus didn't hear. All he could think about was Sophie, 2 weeks old, 3 surgeries ahead of her, no mother, and a father who had no idea what he was doing. He took a leave of absence from NASA, then another, then a permanent one. "You're throwing away your career," his supervisor said. "You're one of the best propulsion engineers we have. We can accommodate. I have a daughter who needs me. We all have families, Marcus. We manage. My daughter has half a heart. She needs more than management. She needs me." He found work at a boat repair shop in Galveston. The pay was a fraction of what he'd made at NASA. The hours were flexible. When Sophie got sick, when her lips turned blue and her breathing went shallow, he could drop everything and run. His old colleagues from NASA invited him to reunions. He never went. That life belonged to someone else now. Someone who still believed the future was something you could engineer. Sophie was 6 years old now. She'd been through 3 surgeries, 4 hospitalizations, countless nights in emergency rooms holding her hand, while machines beeped and doctors spoke in careful, measured tones. She drew pictures of rockets and boats and hearts with wings. She asked every night if Mommy was watching from the stars. Marcus always said yes, even though he'd stopped believing in anything he couldn't hold in his hands. They lived in a small apartment in Miami now. 1 bedroom. Sophie got the bed. Marcus slept on the couch. The walls were thin enough to hear her breathing through the night. The sound that told him she was still alive, still fighting, still his. He'd moved to Miami because the children's hospital here had one of the best pediatric cardiac programs in the country. The job at the marina paid enough to cover rent and food and the endless medical bills that insurance didn't quite cover. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was the life he had, and that was enough. Marcus worked through the night. The other engineers left around midnight. They'd done everything they knew how to do. Run every diagnostic, checked every system. The Sovereign refused to cooperate. Marcus didn't blame them. Hybrid marine systems were complicated. The integration between traditional diesel engines and electric motors required a level of precision that most mechanics never encountered. But Marcus had spent 15 years at NASA. He'd built systems that had to work perfectly in the vacuum of space where there was no second chance, where a single wrong connection meant a mission failure that would take years to recover from. He started with the basics. Ignored the diagnostic computer. Ignored the error codes. Instead, he traced the electrical system by hand, following each wire, checking each connection with his fingers as much as his eyes. The Sovereign's engine room was a work of art. Titanium and carbon fiber. Redundant systems. Everything optimized for performance and efficiency. But somewhere in all that precision, something simple had gone wrong. At 2:47 a.m., he found it. The main ground cable for the hybrid control unit had been connected to the wrong terminal. Positive instead of negative. A simple mistake probably made during the last service visit by someone who was tired or distracted or just not paying attention. But that simple mistake had created a feedback loop that crashed the entire system. The computer thought the engines were failing when nothing was actually wrong. One wire, one connection, one moment of carelessness. Marcus fixed it in 20 minutes. Reconnected the ground properly. Checked every other connection in the system. Then he closed the engine compartment, walked to the bridge, and pressed the start button. The twin V12s roared to life, smooth, perfect, angry at having been silenced. Marcus let them run for 10 minutes, listened to the rhythm. Watched the diagnostics stabilize. Everything was green. Everything worked exactly as it should. He shut down the engines, cleaned up his tools, and walked off the yacht without telling anyone. He didn't leave a note, didn't ask for recognition. The job was done. That was enough. Victoria returned to the marina at 7:30 a.m. She'd barely slept. Had spent most of the night on the phone with lawyers and board members rearranging her schedule around this disaster. She expected to find the Sovereign exactly where she'd left it. Dead. Defeated. Another example of incompetence that she'd have to fix herself. She walked up the gangway, sat in the captain's chair, and pressed the start button. The engine started on the first try. Victoria sat there for a long moment, her hand still on the ignition. Her mind trying to process what had just happened. Who fixed it? The harbor master was standing on the dock. He glanced toward the workshop where Marcus was already elbow-deep in a fishing boat's outboard motor. Not sure, the harbor master said. One of the night crew must have figured it out. Victoria's eyes found Marcus anyway. She watched him work for a long moment. The way his hands moved with absolute certainty. No wasted motion. No hesitation. This wasn't a man performing for an audience. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing and didn't need anyone's approval. Something shifted in her chest. Not attraction. Not yet. Just recognition. The kind you feel when you see someone who operates by the same rules you do. Competence above everything. Results over recognition. The work mattering more than the credit. She drove away without saying thank you. But she thought about him all morning. 3 days later, Victoria invented a reason to come back. A noise in the steering system, a vibration in the hull, something she'd made up in the elevator on her way to a board meeting, an excuse so thin it embarrassed her. She pulled into the marina just after 2 p.m. The Sovereign purred like it had never been sick. She found Marcus in the back corner of the workshop, and she stopped walking. because sitting on his lap head against his chest was a little girl. Small, dark hair, eyes closed, her hand curled into his shirt. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. The girl stirred, opened her eyes, dark brown, huge, solemn. She looked at Victoria for a long moment. Then she smiled. "I dreamed about you," she said. "You were a sad mermaid, swimming in a big, empty ocean." The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She had a brother once, past tense, Thomas. He died when she was 12. A heart defect no one caught in time. She'd spent 20 years perfecting the art of not thinking about him. Marcus's hand was gentle on his daughter's back. Protective. Automatic. "This is Sophie," he said. "She has a big imagination and a big heart." Sophie sat up suddenly serious. "Too big. That's what the doctors say. It doesn't work right." Victoria's throat closed. "What's wrong?" Marcus's voice was quiet. Factual. The voice of a man who'd said these words 1,000 times. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome. She was born with the left side of her heart severely underdeveloped. She's had 3 surgeries already. We're waiting until she's strong enough for the final one. Sophie tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "But I'm okay. I can run for almost a whole minute now. Last year it was only 30 seconds. Victoria found herself kneeling, eye level with this tiny girl who measured her life in heartbeats. "That's really impressive," she heard herself say. "Dad says I'm the strongest person he knows." Sophie grinned. And Victoria saw Marcus in the shape of her smile. That same quiet confidence. That same refusal to be defeated by circumstance. Marcus checked his daughter's pulse. 30 seconds of counting his fingers gentle on her wrist. When he was satisfied, he let go. Sophie hopped down, already chattering about the sailboat someone had brought in that morning. Victoria stood slowly. She'd spent 5 years training herself not to feel things, and this 6-year-old had cracked her open in under 5 minutes. "Your yacht is fine," Marcus said. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching Sophie examine a coil of rope with serious concentration. Nothing wrong with the steering or the hull. Victoria's face went hot. "I thought..." "You thought you needed a reason to come back." His eyes met hers then, and they weren't unkind, just knowing. "You don't." For the first time in years, Victoria Sterling didn't have a response prepared. She didn't say goodbye. Didn't say thank you. Just turned and walked back to her car, her heart beating harder than it had in years. But she came back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that. It became a routine, though neither of them called it that. Victoria started stopping by the marina during lunch. She told herself it was convenient the marina was only 20 minutes from her office, and she needed to check on the Sovereign anyway. She told herself it was networking, building relationships with people who worked with their hands, staying connected to the real world, instead of just boardrooms and balance sheets. She was lying, and she knew it. The first few visits were awkward. She'd show up in her designer suits and her $300 shoes, and the other mechanics would stare at her like she'd landed from another planet. She'd find Marcus working on whatever boat needed attention that day, and she'd stand there with her arms crossed, watching him work, not knowing what to say. Marcus didn't make it easy. He didn't stop working when she arrived, didn't jump up to greet her, didn't act like her presence was anything special. "You're back," he said, on her 4th visit, not looking up from the engine he was rebuilding. "I had some time." "You run a billion-dollar company. You don't have time. You make time." Victoria felt her face flush. "Maybe I wanted to see how the other half lives." "The other half lives fine. We just don't have as many shoes." She laughed before she could stop herself. It was an ugly laugh, unpracticed, nothing like the polished chuckle she used in board meetings. Marcus looked up then, and something in his expression shifted, like he'd seen something he hadn't expected. "There's coffee in the break room," he said. "It's terrible, but it's hot." "I don't drink terrible coffee." "Then bring your own next time." She did. The next day she showed up with 2 cups from the French cafe downtown, $8 each. She handed one to Marcus without a word. He took a sip, raised an eyebrow. This is what rich people drink. This is what people with taste drink. Tastes like someone burned a flower and poured water over it. It's lavender infused. I know what it is. I just don't know why anyone would do that to coffee. Victoria grabbed the cup back. Fine, more for me. But she was smiling, and so was he. The visits became longer. She'd bring coffee, regular coffee, now dark roast, no flowers, and pastries from the bakery near her office. Marcus would take a break from whatever he was working on, and they'd sit on the bench outside the workshop watching the boats drift in and out of the harbor. They talked about engines at first. Safe territory. Victoria knew more about machinery than most people realized. Her father had made sure she understood every aspect of the business, including the ships that made it run. Marcus was surprised by her knowledge, and Victoria was surprised by how much she enjoyed surprising him. "You actually know what a crankshaft does," he said one afternoon, genuine admiration in his voice. "I know what everything does. My father used to quiz me at dinner. If I got an answer wrong, I didn't get dessert." That's intense. That's how you build someone who can run a company. You don't give them dessert until they earn it. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Is that what you're doing, running a company or surviving one? Nobody had ever asked her that before. Nobody had ever thought to ask. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "Some days it feels like I'm steering the ship. Other days it feels like the ship is dragging me behind it, and I'm just trying not to drown." That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get used to it. But she kept being honest. Something about Marcus made it impossible to be anything else. He didn't care about her money or her title or her reputation. He treated her like a person, flawed, complicated, real. And she hadn't been treated like a person in so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like. The conversations drifted. Movies they'd seen. Books they'd read. The small, stupid failures of being human in a world that demanded perfection. "I cried during a board meeting once," Victoria confessed. "Right in front of everyone. Right after my divorce was finalized. I excused myself and went to the bathroom and cried for 20 minutes. "What happened?" "Nothing. I went back in and finished the meeting. Fired 2 people that afternoon. Nobody ever mentioned it." "Because they were scared of you." "Because they should be scared of me. The moment they stop being scared is the moment they start thinking they can take what's mine." Marcus shook his head. "That's no way to live." "It's the only way I know how to live." He looked at her, then really looked at her, and his eyes were sad. "That's the problem, Victoria. You've been fighting so long you've forgotten there's anything else." She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he didn't understand, that he'd never walked into a room full of men who wanted to watch her fail, who'd been waiting for her to fail since the moment her father died. But she couldn't. Because he was right. Sophie changed everything. The little girl had taken to Victoria immediately. It made no sense. Victoria had never been good with children, had never wanted children, had built her entire life around the assumption that she would never have them. But Sophie didn't care about any of that. "Miss Victoria!" she'd shout whenever Victoria's car pulled into the marina parking lot. She'd come running, not too fast. Never too fast, because running made her heart work too hard. With her arms spread wide like she was trying to hug the whole world. Victoria would kneel down, let Sophie crash into her, and feel something crack open in her chest every single time. "I drew you a picture," Sophie said one afternoon, thrusting a piece of paper into Victoria's hands. It was a boat. A big one with a woman standing on the deck. The woman had yellow hair. Victoria's hair, and she was smiling. Next to her stood 2 smaller figures, a man and a little girl. "That's you," Sophie said, pointing at the yellow-haired woman. "And that's Daddy. And that's me. We're on a boat. We're on your boat, the big shiny one. We're going on an adventure." Victoria looked at the drawing for a long time. She couldn't speak. Her throat was too tight. Do you like it? Sophie asked, suddenly worried. I can draw another one if you don't. I love it, Victoria said, and her voice came out strange. I love it, Sophie. It's perfect. Sophie beamed. Daddy says you're sad sometimes. I wanted to make you not sad. Victoria looked up at Marcus. He was standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable. Your daddy talks about me. Sophie nodded seriously. He says you're like a boat that lost its anchor. You just keep floating and you don't know where to stop. The words hit Victoria like a wave. She had to look away, had to pretend she was studying the drawing, because if she kept looking at this little girl with her too big heart and her too honest eyes, she was going to fall apart completely. Sophie, Marcus said gently, why don't you go check on the fish in the tank? I think Mr. Rodriguez brought some new ones this morning. Okay, Sophie kissed Victoria on the cheek, quick, casual, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and ran off toward the workshop. Victoria stood up slowly. Her legs felt unsteady. She shouldn't run, she said, because she didn't know what else to say. She knows her limits, better than most adults know theirs. How do you do it? The question came out before Victoria could stop it. How do you wake up every day knowing that her heart might stop? Marcus finished. His voice was calm, but his eyes were heavy. I don't think about it. If I thought about it, I'd never get out of bed. So I just don't. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Victoria sat down on the bench. After a moment, Marcus sat beside her. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dock. I had a brother, Victoria said. The words surprised her. She hadn't planned to say them, hadn't talked about Thomas in years. His name was Thomas. He was 2 years younger than me. He had a heart defect. Nobody caught it in time. Marcus didn't say anything, just listened. He died when I was 12. One day he was there annoying me, stealing my toys, and the next day he was just gone. No warning, no goodbye. Just gone. I'm sorry. I've never told anyone that. Not my ex-husband, not my therapist, not anyone. Why are you telling me? Victoria looked at him. At this man who'd lost everything and somehow kept going. Who woke up every day with his daughter's life hanging by a thread and still managed to smile, to laugh, to fix other people's broken things. Because you understand, she said. Because you know what it's like to love someone whose heart might stop at any moment, and you do it anyway. Marcus was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Her name was Elena, my wife. She died the day Sophie was born. Complications from the delivery. 1 minute she was holding our daughter, and the next... He stopped, swallowed hard. She made me promise. Right before she died. She made me swear I'd give Sophie a good life. Not a perfect one, she knew that was impossible. But a good one. Full of love and safety and people who gave a damn. You're doing that, Victoria said. Anyone can see you're doing that. Some days I'm not sure. Some days I think I'm just keeping her alive until I figure out what I'm actually supposed to do. Victoria reached over and took his hand. She didn't think about it, didn't analyze it, didn't worry about what it meant. She just did it. You fixed my engine, she said. One wrong connection and the whole system crashed. You said that. I remember. Small things cause big failures, in engines. She squeezed his hand. And in hearts. Marcus looked at their hands intertwined. Then he looked at her. Yeah, he said softly. In hearts too. They sat there as the sun went down. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Some silences are awkward. This one felt like coming home. The weeks that followed were the happiest Victoria could remember. She restructured her schedule around trips to the marina. Morning meetings got moved to afternoon. Conference calls got shortened. For the first time in years, she started leaving the office before dark. Her assistant noticed. You seem different, Ms. Hayes. Different how? Less intense, more relaxed. Is that a problem? No, ma'am. It's just new. Victoria didn't explain, couldn't explain. How do you tell someone that a mechanic and his 6-year-old daughter have somehow become the best part of your day? She started bringing Sophie presents. Nothing extravagant. Victoria had learned early that Marcus didn't like extravagant. A coloring book from the gift shop at her office. A stuffed dolphin she'd spotted in a store window. A children's book about a girl who sailed around the world. You're spoiling her, Marcus said, but he was smiling. I'm investing in her development. Is that what we're calling it? I'm a businesswoman. Everything's an investment. But they both knew that wasn't true. Victoria wasn't investing in anything. She was falling in love. Not just with Marcus, though that was part of it. She was falling in love with the life they'd built. The coffee breaks that turned into lunches. The afternoons watching Sophie draw pictures while Marcus explained the difference between diesel and electric engines. The quiet moments when neither of them said anything because they didn't need to. She was falling in love with being someone other than Victoria Hayes' CEO. Someone who could laugh at bad jokes and get grease on her expensive clothes and not care what anyone thought about it. You're different here, Marcus observed one day. Different than you are on TV. TV Victoria is a character, a performance. This is just me. I like this version better. So do I. One afternoon, Sophie fell asleep with her head in Victoria's lap. The little girl's breathing was steady, her heartbeat visible in the pulse at her throat. Victoria sat frozen, terrified of waking her, terrified of disturbing this perfect moment. Marcus sat down beside them, close enough that their shoulders touched. She likes you, he said quietly. I like her too. She doesn't trust easily. After her mom, after everything, she's careful with people. But she trusts you. Victoria looked down at Sophie's sleeping face. So peaceful, so fragile. What if I let her down? She whispered. What if I'm not who she thinks I am? Who do you think she thinks you are? I don't know. Someone good, someone kind, someone worth loving. Marcus turned to face her. Victoria, you are all of those things. I'm not. I'm sharp and cold and difficult. I fire people without flinching. I destroy competitors without remorse. I'm not— You're all of those things too, Marcus interrupted. But they're not the whole picture. People are complicated. You can be sharp and kind at the same time. Cold in the boardroom and warm with the people you love. The world doesn't divide into heroes and villains. Victoria felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back. How do you do that? She asked. Do what? See the best in people, even people who don't deserve it. Everyone deserves it. That's kind of the point. Sophie stirred in her sleep. Her hand found Victoria's and held on tight. Daddy, she murmured, still half asleep. I'm here, sweetheart. Miss Victoria, too. She's here, too. Sophie smiled without opening her eyes. Good. I dreamed we were a family. Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only sit there with this child's hand in hers and this man's shoulder against hers and feel the impossible weight of wanting something she'd convinced herself she could never have. We should get her home, Marcus said gently. Yeah, of course. But neither of them moved, not for a long time. They took Sophie for ice cream that weekend. Her first time at the place on the boardwalk, the one with 37 flavors and a view of the ocean. Sophie insisted on trying everything. I want chocolate. No vanilla. No strawberry. No all of them. You can't have all of them, Marcus said. Why not? Because your stomach would explode. Sophie considered this. Would I die? Probably. From ice cream. The best way to go, honestly. Sophie giggled. She ended up choosing mint chocolate chip, which she declared, the best thing ever invented, better than boats and drawings and everything. Victoria watched them together. Father and daughter. The easy love between them, the automatic care. Marcus checking Sophie's pulse without her even noticing. Sophie leaning into her father's side like he was the safest place in the world. She thought about her own father. The quizzes at dinner. The expectations. The feeling that love was something you earned, not something you were given. "You okay?" Marcus asked. "Fine. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how different things could have been. If I'd had a father like you." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Your dad loved you. I'm sure of it." "He did, in his way. But his way was hard. He prepared me to survive, not to be happy. Maybe he didn't know another way. Maybe. Or maybe he just didn't think happiness was important." Sophie tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "Miss Victoria, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, sweetie. Your eyes are sad. They get all crinkly when you're sad." Victoria laughed, wiping at her eyes. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that. Daddy says the same thing." "Daddy's right." Sophie held out her ice cream cone. "You can have some. It'll make you feel better." Victoria looked at the cone already dripping, covered in Sophie's fingerprints. 3 months ago she would have been disgusted, would have politely declined and then sanitized her hands. Instead, she leaned forward and took a bite. "Hey," Sophie protested, laughing. "Not that much. You offered. I didn't think you'd actually do it." Marcus was watching them with an expression Victoria couldn't read. When she caught his eye, he looked away quickly. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. Just nothing." But it wasn't nothing. They both knew it. Later, after they'd dropped Sophie off at Marcus's apartment, after she'd kissed them both goodnight and made them promise to come back tomorrow, Victoria and Marcus stood in the parking lot. "Thank you," Marcus said, "for today. She doesn't get to do stuff like this very often." "Why not?" "Because ice cream trips cost money. And money is—" He shrugged. "Anyway, thank you." Victoria wanted to offer help. Wanted to write a check, pay off his bills, fix everything with the money she had more of than she could ever spend. But she knew he wouldn't accept it. Knew that his pride was one of the things she loved about him. So instead she said, "Same time tomorrow." Marcus smiled. That quiet, steady smile that made her feel like everything was going to be okay. Same time tomorrow. She drove home with the windows down, the Miami night air warm against her skin. She couldn't stop smiling. She should have known it couldn't last. The photo appeared 3 weeks later. Victoria didn't see it happen, didn't notice the man with the camera across the street, didn't hear the click of the shutter. She was too busy laughing at something Sophie had said. Too busy holding the little girl's hand. Too busy being happy for the first time in years. The photographer's name was Marcus Chen. He ran a gossip blog called Elite Exposed. He'd been tipped off by someone at Hayes Maritime, a middle manager with a grudge and an eye for scandal. He got exactly what he came for. Victoria, Marcus, and Sophie sitting on that bench outside the marina. The little girl in the middle holding both their hands. Victoria's head thrown back, caught mid-laugh, her face open in a way it never was in boardrooms. And Marcus looking at Victoria with an expression that was unmistakable. The photo went live at 6 p.m. By 8 p.m., it was everywhere. Victoria's phone started ringing at 8:17 p.m. She was still in her car, still smiling from the afternoon, still replaying Sophie's laughter in her head. She glanced at the screen. Her publicist, then her lawyer, then 3 board members in quick succession, then her mother. Something was wrong. She answered on the 5th call. "What happened?" "Have you been online?" Her publicist's voice was tight, controlled, the way it got when things were about to explode. "Have you seen it?" "Seen what?" "Victoria, pull over. Now." She did. Parked on the side of the road with her hazards on the Miami skyline glittering in her rearview mirror. She opened her browser. The headline hit her like a punch to the chest. Ice Queen CEO melts for blue-collar Romeo Victoria Hayes' secret marina romance. The photo was right there. Her Marcus Sophie, laughing, holding hands, looking like exactly what they were, three people who'd found something real in a world full of fake. The comments were already in the thousands. She's slumming it LOL. Gold digger found his mark. That poor kid caught in the middle. PR stunt. Has to be. No way she'd actually date a mechanic. Who's the brat? His kid from another woman? Victoria's hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. Her phone rang again. Her mother. What are you thinking? Margaret Hayes' voice was ice. What in God's name are you thinking? Mother. A mechanic, Victoria. A boat mechanic. After everything your father built, after everything you've worked for, you're going to throw it all away for a man who changes oil for a living. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Explain it to me. Explain why the CEO of Hayes Maritime is holding hands with the help while the entire internet watches. Victoria closed her eyes. He's not the help. He's nobody. He's nothing. And that child in the picture, whose child is that? Please tell me you haven't gotten involved with a man who has baggage. Her name is Sophie. She's 6 years old. And she has a heart condition that... I don't care if she has wings and a halo. This looks terrible. This is terrible. The board is going to crucify you. The board doesn't control my personal life. Margaret laughed. It was not a kind sound. The board controls everything, Victoria. You know that. Your father knew that. The moment you forget, it is the moment they take everything away. Victoria hung up. Her hands were still shaking. The phone rang again. Richard Moss, chairman of the board. She answered. Victoria. His voice was calm. Too calm. We need to talk. Tonight. It's almost 9 o'clock. The conference room, 1 hour. This can't wait. He hung up before she could respond. Victoria sat in her car for a long time. The Miami night pressed against the windows. Somewhere out there, Marcus was putting Sophie to bed. Reading her a story, checking her pulse. Being the father he'd always been. He didn't know yet. Didn't know that their quiet happiness had been photographed and packaged and sold to the highest bidder. She should call him. Should warn him. But what would she say? How do you tell someone that loving you might cost them everything? She started the car and drove to the office. The conference room was cold. It was always cold. Victoria kept the thermostat low because it kept people alert, kept meetings short. Tonight, it felt like a freezer. 7 people sat around the table. Richard Moss at the head, his silver hair perfectly combed, his expression perfectly neutral. Patricia Winters, the CFO, with her tablet open to a spreadsheet Victoria couldn't read from this distance. 5 other board members, all of them carefully avoiding her eyes. Victoria sat down at her usual seat. Let's get this over with. This is serious, Victoria. Moss didn't raise his voice. He never did. This affects the company. This affects all of us. It's a photograph, nothing more. It's a narrative. Patricia pulled up her tablet, started reading. Here's Forbes, Hayes Maritime CEO's shocking romance raises questions about judgment. Here's Bloomberg, has Victoria Hayes lost her edge? The Wall Street Journal is running an op-ed tomorrow questioning your fitness to lead. My fitness to lead because I had lunch with someone. Because you had lunch with a boat mechanic, repeatedly, for weeks, without telling anyone. Moss leaned forward. We're in the middle of the Singapore acquisition. That deal is worth $400 million. The investors are already nervous. This doesn't help. My personal life has nothing to do with the Singapore deal. Your personal life is the company's life. That's the reality you signed up for when you took this position. Patricia's voice was sharp. You don't get to be a private citizen anymore. Every decision you make reflects on Hayes Maritime. Every relationship you have affects shareholder confidence. Victoria felt something rising in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years: panic. So, what are you saying? That I need permission to have friends? That I need board approval to have coffee with someone? We're saying you need to be smart. Another board member spoke up, David Chen, the oldest member, the one who'd known her father. Your father understood this. He kept his personal life completely separate from the business. He never gave anyone ammunition. My father was also miserable. He died alone in his office at 62 because he'd driven away everyone who ever loved him. Silence. The kind that presses down on you like a weight. Moss cleared his throat. Victoria, we're not trying to control your life. We're trying to protect the company your father built. Surely you understand that. What I understand is that 7 people are sitting in a room at 10 o'clock at night telling me who I'm allowed to care about. We're telling you the reality of the situation. Patricia again, relentless. Institutional investors are asking questions. 3 pension funds want reassurance that you're still focused. If you can't provide that reassurance, they'll pull their money. And if they pull their money, the Singapore deal collapses. Victoria looked around the table. These were people she'd known for years, people she'd worked with, fought with, built something with. None of them were looking at her like she was a person. They were looking at her like she was a problem to be solved. What do you want me to do? Moss straightened his tie. You need to make a statement, tonight. Clarify that this is not a romantic relationship, that your focus remains entirely on Hayes Maritime and our continued growth. And if I don't, the silence was longer this time, heavier. Then we'll be forced to consider whether you're still the right person to lead this company. Victoria's blood went cold. You'd remove me over a photograph. Over a pattern of behavior that suggests your priorities have shifted. Over the appearance of impropriety during a critical acquisition. Over the damage this is doing to our reputation. Moss spread his hands. We don't want to do this, Victoria. But the board has a fiduciary duty to the shareholders. If you're not willing to put the company first. I have put this company first every single day for the last 10 years. Victoria's voice was shaking now. She couldn't stop it. I've sacrificed everything. My marriage, my health, any chance at a normal life. I have given Hayes Maritime everything I have. Then give it a little more. Patricia's voice softened just slightly. Make the statement, end the speculation, and be more careful in the future. Victoria looked at the window. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman in a designer suit, her face a mask of professional composure, her eyes hollow. She thought about Marcus, about Sophie, about the way it felt to sit on that bench and laugh at nothing, and feel for the first time in years like she was actually alive. She thought about losing the company, about watching everything her father built get carved up and sold off because she'd fallen for someone the board considered beneath her. Fine, she heard herself say. I'll make the statement. Moss smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I knew you'd see reason. The press conference was held at midnight. Victoria's publicist had called every major outlet, promised an exclusive statement. The reporters gathered in the lobby of Hayes Maritime's headquarters, cameras ready, microphones extended like weapons. Victoria stood at the podium. Her hair was perfect. Her suit was perfect. Her makeup was perfect. Everything about her was perfect, except the sick feeling in her stomach that wouldn't go away. Thank you all for coming, she began. Her voice was steady. She'd practiced this. I want to address the photographs that have been circulating today. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted a question. She ignored it. Rodri Marina services several of Hayes Maritime's vessels. Over the past few months, I've developed a professional relationship with some members of the staff there. The photographs you've seen show nothing more than that, a professional relationship. Another flash. Another shouted question. Any suggestion of a personal or romantic relationship is inaccurate. My focus remains entirely on Hayes Maritime, on our continued growth, and on completing the Singapore acquisition successfully." She paused, swallowed hard. "I want to be clear. I am committed to this company. I have been committed to this company since the day my father died. Nothing and no one will change that." The words tasted like ash, like betrayal, like every other lie she'd ever told herself about what mattered. "Thank you. I won't be taking questions." She walked away from the podium, walked past the reporters, past her publicist, past the security guards. Walked all the way to her car before her legs gave out. She sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, and didn't move for a long time. Somewhere across the city, Marcus was watching. She knew it without having to check. She knew he'd hear those words, "Any suggestion of a personal relationship is inaccurate," and understand exactly what she'd chosen. She'd chosen the company, chosen the board, chosen the life her father had built for her over the life she'd started to imagine for herself. She'd chosen wrong. She knew that, felt it in every bone in her body. But she didn't know how to choose differently. Marcus watched the press conference on his laptop. Sophie was asleep in the next room, her breathing steady, her heart monitor beeping its quiet rhythm. He'd seen the photos earlier that evening. The neighbor had shown him kindly, gently, the way you show someone their own execution before it happens. "Is that you?" she'd asked. "With the lady from the news." Marcus had looked at the photo, at Victoria's laughing face, at Sophie's small hand in hers. "Yeah," he'd said. "That's me." He'd known then that something was coming. Rich people didn't date poor people without consequences. Worlds didn't collide without someone getting hurt. He just hadn't expected it to happen so fast. Now he watched Victoria stand at that podium, her face a mask, her voice perfectly controlled. He watched her deny everything they'd built, everything they'd felt. "Any suggestion of a personal relationship is inaccurate." The words hit him like a fist. Not because they were a surprise he'd known this was coming, but because he'd let himself hope anyway. Stupid. He was 43 years old. He should have known better by now. He closed the laptop, sat in the dark, listened to his daughter breathe. He didn't blame Victoria, didn't hate her. She was trapped in a world that demanded things he couldn't give. Appearances, status, the kind of life that looked good in magazines. He was a single father with a dying daughter and a job that paid just enough to keep them alive. He didn't fit into her world. He never would. The phone rang. He didn't answer. It rang again and again. Finally, a text. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice. Please let me explain." He read the message 3 times. Then he deleted it. What was there to explain? She'd made her choice. The same choice anyone would make in her position. The company, the money, the life she'd built. He was just the mechanic who'd fixed her engine. Nothing more. He typed out his resignation letter at 2 a.m., kept it simple. "Thank you for the opportunity. My last day will be Friday." He sent it before he could change his mind. Thursday morning, Marcus showed up at the marina like nothing had changed. He fixed a transmission, rotated tires on a yacht, helped the new kid understand why you never over-tighten an oil filter. His hands did the work. His mind was somewhere else. "You okay?" the harbor master asked around noon. "Fine. That woman hasn't been back, not since—" "I know." "You want to talk about it?" "No." The harbor master nodded. He was a good man, knew when to push and when to leave things alone. "Offer stands," he said and walked away. Marcus kept working. What else was there to do Friday afternoon? He cleaned out his corner of the workshop. He didn't have some tools, a thermos, a drawing Sophie had made of the two of them standing next to a rocket ship. "Like when you worked at NASA," she'd said. "You and me going to the stars." He packed it all in a cardboard box, said goodbye to the guys he'd worked with, shook hands with the harbor master. "You sure about this?" the old man asked. "Yeah. Time to move on." This isn't about the pictures, about her. Marcus looked out at the harbor, at the boats bobbing in the afternoon sun, at the bench where he had sat with Victoria and Sophie, laughing at nothing, feeling like the luckiest man alive. "It's just time," he said. "That's all." He drove home in his 13-year-old Toyota. Sophie sang along to the radio in the back seat, oblivious to everything except the joy of being alive. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. "Sure, sweetheart." The fancy place with the 37 flavors. He thought about the cost. About the budget he'd already blown through this month. About the medical bills stacking up on his kitchen counter. "Sure," he said anyway. "The fancy place." Because some days you needed ice cream more than you needed financial responsibility. Some days you needed to give your daughter something good in a world that kept trying to take things away. They sat on the boardwalk and watched the sunset. Sophie ate her mint chocolate chip, slowly savoring every bite. "Daddy," she said. "Yeah. Is Miss Victoria coming back?" Marcus's heart clenched. "I don't think so, sweetheart." "Did we do something wrong?" "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." "Then why isn't she coming back?" How do you explain the adult world to a 6-year-old? How do you tell your daughter that some people live in castles and some people live in apartments, and the castle people aren't allowed to love the apartment people, no matter how much they might want to? "Sometimes people just have different lives," Marcus said. "Sometimes they care about each other, but their lives don't fit together." Sophie thought about this. Her little face scrunched up in concentration. "That's sad," she finally said. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "It is." She finished her ice cream in silence. When they got home, she asked him to read her favorite book, the one about the girl who sailed around the world. "She went everywhere," Sophie said, pointing at the pictures. "Even when people said she couldn't, even when it was hard. She was brave. Like me, just like you." Sophie smiled. "I'm going to sail around the world someday, when my heart is fixed." "I know you will." "And Miss Victoria can come too, on her big boat." Marcus didn't have the heart to tell her that wasn't going to happen. So he just said, "Maybe, sweetheart, maybe." Sophie fell asleep holding his hand. He stayed there until her grip loosened, then went to the living room and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. He didn't cry. He'd used up all his tears years ago when Elena died. There was nothing left now except a dull ache in his chest that wouldn't go away. He found a new job by Monday, a shop in Key West, further from the children's hospital, but closer to nothing that reminded him of Victoria Hayes. The pay was worse. He didn't care. Life continued. One day, then another. He stopped checking his phone for messages that weren't coming. Victoria went back to work. She threw herself into the Singapore acquisition with the intensity of someone running from their own thoughts. 16-hour days. Slept in her office more than her apartment. 8 meals at her desk alone, staring at spreadsheets that blurred together into meaningless numbers. The Singapore deal closed 3 weeks after the press conference. $400 million. The board was pleased. Richard Moss sent her a bottle of champagne with a note that said, "Well done. Your father would be proud." She threw the bottle in the trash. The stock price climbed. The press moved on to other scandals. Life at Hayes Maritime returned to normal. Victoria felt nothing, which was fine. Nothing was safe. Nothing was predictable. Nothing couldn't hurt you. She stopped going to the marina, stopped driving past it, stopped looking at the ocean entirely, because every time she did, she thought about Sophie's drawing the boat with 3 people on it sailing toward the horizon. She thought about calling Marcus 100 times, 1,000. Her finger would hover over his name in her contacts, and she'd imagine what she would say. "I'm sorry. I was scared. I should have chosen you." But she never pressed the button, because what good would it do? The damage was done. She'd made her choice, and now she had to live with it. At night alone in her penthouse, She'd stand at the window and watch the lights of the city. The same lights she'd watched for years. The same view. The same emptiness. Nothing had changed. That was the cruelest part. She'd given up the only real thing she'd ever had, and nothing had changed at all. 3 weeks passed. Then her phone rang at 1:47 a.m. on a Wednesday night. She was still at the office reviewing contracts for a deal she didn't care about. She almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Probably spam. But something made her pick up. Ms. Hayes. A woman's voice. Professional. Carefully neutral. This is Allison from Jackson Memorial Hospital. I'm calling about Sophie Webb. Victoria's entire body went cold. Her hand tightened on the phone until her knuckles went white. What happened? She was admitted to the pediatric cardiac ICU about an hour ago. Her father listed you as an emergency contact. A pause. Can you come? Victoria was already moving. Grabbing her keys. Grabbing her phone. Not bothering with her coat. I'm on my way. She made it to the hospital in 11 minutes. Parked illegally. Ran through the lobby. Punched the elevator button 7 times like it would make it faster. The doors opened on the 4th floor. The smell of antiseptic. The sound of machines. The particular silence that only exists in hospitals at 2 in the morning. She found Marcus in the hallway outside the ICU. He was sitting in a plastic chair, slumped forward, his hands hanging between his knees. He looked like a man who'd been hollowed out. Marcus. He looked up. His eyes were red. His face was gray. For a moment, neither of them moved. 3 weeks of silence. 3 weeks of pretending the other person didn't exist. None of it mattered now. What happened? Victoria sat down beside him. Didn't ask permission. Just sat. She collapsed at school. His voice was raw. Broken. They called 911. Her heart. They're saying she needs surgery now. Not in 6 months. Not when she's stronger. Now. Okay. What do they need? Marcus laughed. It was the most terrible sound Victoria had ever heard. A miracle. Or $350,000 I don't have. The surgery isn't fully covered. They'll do it anyway, but I'll be paying it off until I die. Victoria pulled out her phone. What are you doing? Calling the best pediatric cardiac surgeon in the state. He owes me a favor. Victoria, don't. She looked at him. Really looked at him. At this man who'd lost everything and kept going. Who was about to lose the only thing that mattered. Don't tell me not to help, she said. Don't tell me it's too much. I have money sitting in accounts doing nothing but making more money. Let me use it for something that actually matters. You said we weren't anything. You stood in front of cameras and said, I know what I said. Her voice cracked. I know what I did, and I have hated myself every single day since. But this isn't about me. This isn't about us. This is about Sophie. Marcus stared at her. His eyes were bright with tears he wouldn't let fall. Why are you here? He whispered. After everything. Why did you come? Because I love her. The words came out before Victoria could stop them. Because I love both of you, and because I was too much of a coward to admit it when it mattered. Marcus didn't respond. He just sat there looking at her, and something in his expression shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But something. I'm sorry, Victoria said. For all of it. For the press conference. For the silence. For choosing the wrong thing. You chose what you had to choose. No, I chose what I was afraid not to choose. There's a difference. A doctor appeared at the end of the hallway. Young. Tired. His scrubs were wrinkled. Mr. Webb, we're ready to take Sophie into surgery. Marcus stood up. His legs were unsteady. Victoria stood with him, her hand finding his without her telling it to. Can I see her first? Briefly. She's sedated, but she'll know you're there. They followed the doctor to a window that looked into the ICU. Through the glass, Victoria could see Sophie, tiny pale, surrounded by machines and tubes and wires. But she was awake. Barely. Her eyes flickered open when she saw her father's face. Marcus pressed his hand to the glass. Sophie raised her small hand and pressed it to the other side, matching him. Victoria's heart shattered. Right there in that hallway with the fluorescent lights humming and the machines beeping and this little girl's life hanging by a thread. She put her hand over Marcus's. 3 hands on the glass. 3 people who'd found each other in the wreckage and were trying desperately to hold on. "I love you, baby," Marcus whispered. "I love you so much." Sophie smiled, weak but real. Then her eyes found Victoria. "You came back," she said. Her voice was so soft they could barely hear it through the glass. "I came back," Victoria said. "I'm sorry it took so long." "It's okay." Sophie's eyes were already closing. "I knew you would." The nurses wheeled her away. The doors swung shut behind them. And then there was nothing to do but wait. The surgery was scheduled to take 6 hours. The doctors said it could go longer. Victoria and Marcus sat in the waiting room. The chairs were hard plastic, designed for function rather than comfort. The walls were beige. The clock on the wall ticked so loudly it seemed to echo. Neither of them spoke for the first hour. There was nothing to say. Nothing that would change what was happening behind those doors. Victoria made phone calls. First, she called Dr. Raymond Chen, the best pediatric cardiac surgeon in Florida. He was retired now, living in Palm Beach, but he owed her a favor. She'd donated $2 million to his research foundation 3 years ago. Now she was calling in the debt. "Victoria!" His voice was groggy. It was 3 a.m. "What's wrong?" "I need you at Jackson Memorial. Pediatric cardiac surgery. A little girl named Sophie Webb." "I'm retired." "I know, but you're the best, and she needs the best." A pause. She could hear him moving, getting out of bed. "What's the case?" "Hypoplastic left heart syndrome. She's had 3 surgeries already. Something went wrong. They're operating now, but I want you there. Consulting. Making sure they don't miss anything." "Victoria, I can't just walk into someone else's surgery." "Yes, you can. I'll make it happen. Just get there." Another pause. Then, "I'll be there in an hour." She hung up. Marcus was watching her. "Who was that?" "Someone who's going to help. Don't argue with me." "I wasn't going to." "Good." She made more calls. Hospital administrators, board members she knew, people who owed her favors, people who wanted her money, people who would move mountains if she asked them to. She called them all. By 4 a.m., Dr. Chen was in the operating room scrubbing in. By 5 a.m., the hospital's chief of surgery had personally guaranteed that Sophie would receive the best care in the state. Marcus watched her work, watched her transform from the woman who'd broken his heart into something else entirely, a force of nature bending the world to her will through sheer determination. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "At what?" "Making things happen. Moving pieces around. Getting people to do what you want." Victoria looked at her phone. Her hands were shaking. "I'm good at it when it matters," she said. "When it's spreadsheets and contracts, I don't care. But this..." She looked toward the operating room doors. "This matters. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when she's okay." She's going to be okay. Victoria wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe it more than she'd ever wanted anything. But she'd learned a long time ago that wanting something didn't make it true. "Tell me about Elena," she said. Marcus looked at her surprised. "What?" "Your wife. Tell me about her. We've got hours to wait. I want to know." He was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. "She was the smartest person I ever met. Not book smart, though she was that too, but smart in the way that matters. She understood people, understood what they needed before they knew it themselves." "How did you meet at NASA cafeteria?" "I was arguing with a colleague about thermodynamics. She walked up and told us we were both wrong. Then she explained why. I fell in love with her somewhere between the 3rd equation and the 4th. Victoria smiled despite herself. Sounds romantic. It was, in a nerdy engineer kind of way. He opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling. We had 3 years. 3 years of being happy. 3 years of planning a future we never got to have. What happened during the delivery? Complications. Hemorrhaging. They couldn't stop it. His voice was steady, but Victoria could hear the cracks underneath. She held Sophie for 7 minutes. That's all she got. 7 minutes with our daughter. I'm sorry. She made me promise. Right there at the end. Made me swear I'd give Sophie a good life. Not a perfect one, she knew that was impossible. But a good one. You have. Have I? He turned to look at her. Her mother is dead. Her father works 60 hours a week at jobs that barely pay the bills. She spent half her life in hospitals. Is that a good life? She's loved, Victoria said. She knows she's loved. That's more than a lot of people ever get. Marcus was quiet. Then, why did you come tonight? Really? I told you. Because I love her. And me. The question hung in the air between them, heavy, loaded with everything they hadn't said. Yes, Victoria admitted. And you. I've loved you since that first night. Since you looked at me like I was just another person, not a CEO, or an heiress, or a target. You looked at me like I was real. You are real. I didn't feel real. Not for years. Not until I met you. She turned to face him fully. I made a mistake. The press conference, the denial, I was scared. I'd spent my whole life being told that people like me don't end up with people like you. That it doesn't work. That the worlds are too different. Maybe they are. Maybe. But I don't care anymore. I'm tired of living in a world that doesn't have you in it. Marcus reached over and took her hand. His palm was rough, calloused, warm. I watched your press conference, he said. Watched you say we were nothing. And I understood. I knew why you did it. You were protecting yourself. Protecting your company. I was being a coward. You were being human. We all make choices when we're scared. The question is, what we do after. What do you want me to do? He squeezed her hand. Stay. That's all. Just stay. I'm not going anywhere. They sat like that, hands intertwined as the hours crawled past. At 6 a.m. a nurse came out. The surgery is going well. Dr. Chen is amazing. We're about halfway through. At 7 a.m. Victoria fell asleep with her head on Marcus's shoulder. He didn't move. Didn't want to disturb her. Just sat there watching her breathe, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. At 8:30 a.m., the doors to the operating room opened. Dr. Chen emerged first. He was 72 years old, had performed over 1,000 cardiac surgeries, had saved more lives than he could count. But when he saw Marcus and Victoria, he smiled. The surgery was successful. Marcus made a sound Victoria had never heard before. Relief and grief and joy all compressed into one exhale. He bent forward, hands on his knees, and his shoulders shook. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to stop them. We repaired the defect, Dr. Chen continued. Reinforced the surrounding tissue. Barring complications, she should make a full recovery. Full recovery. Marcus's voice was broken. You mean? I mean she's going to be okay. She's going to grow up, run around, do all the things kids do. Dr. Chen put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Your daughter is a fighter. She came through beautifully. Marcus started crying then. Really crying. The kind of tears that had been locked away for years finally breaking free. Victoria put her arms around him, held him while he shook, let her own tears mix with his. You can see her in about an hour, Dr. Chen said. She'll be groggy, but she'll know you're there. He left them alone. Victoria and Marcus stood in that waiting room, holding each other, crying like people who'd forgotten how. It was the most honest either of them had been in years. "Thank you," Marcus finally said, pulling back to look at her. "I don't know how to—" "You don't have to." "I do. You saved her life." "You saved mine first." Victoria wiped at her eyes. "You just did it so quietly I almost missed it." He laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, but it was real. "So did she," he said. "Sophie. She saved us both." They went to see her at 9:30. She was in a private room now. Victoria had arranged that with machines beeping steadily and monitors tracking every heartbeat. Sophie was pale, but awake. Her eyes were heavy with sedation, but they brightened when she saw her father. "Daddy." Marcus was at her side in an instant. He took her hand, pressed it to his lips. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." "Did they fix me?" "Yeah, sweetheart. They fixed you. You're going to be okay." Sophie smiled. Then her eyes found Victoria standing at the foot of the bed. "You came back." Victoria moved closer. "I told you I would. I knew you would. I told Daddy." Sophie's voice was weak but certain. "I said Miss Victoria loves us. She just forgot for a little while." Victoria's throat closed. She couldn't speak, could only nod. "Are you going to stay this time?" Sophie asked. "For real?" Victoria looked at Marcus, at this man who'd lost everything and rebuilt himself from the ground up, at his daughter who'd been fighting for her life since the moment she was born. "Yeah," she said. "I'm staying, for real." Sophie smiled. "Good, because I want you to be at my birthday party. It's in 3 months. Daddy said maybe we can go to the beach." "We can definitely go to the beach. And get ice cream. All the ice cream you want." Sophie's eyes were closing. The sedation was pulling her back under. "I'm tired, Daddy." "Sleep, baby. We'll be here when you wake up." "Promise?" "Promise." She was asleep before he finished the word, but her hand was still holding his, and the heart monitor beeped steady and strong. Marcus and Victoria stood on either side of the bed, watching her breathe. And neither of them said what they were both thinking, that this was the beginning of something none of them knew how to name yet, but all of them desperately needed. The days that followed were long, but hopeful. Sophie recovered faster than anyone expected. Within 3 days, she was sitting up. Within a week, she was demanding to watch cartoons and complaining about the hospital food. "This tastes like cardboard," she announced, pushing away a plate of mashed potatoes. "It's good for you," Marcus said. "Cardboard is good for me. The nutrients, not the taste." Victoria laughed. She'd been at the hospital every day, arriving before visiting hours started and staying until they kicked her out. Her phone rang constantly, the office, the board people who needed decisions made, and she ignored most of it. "You can't keep doing this," Marcus said one evening as Victoria silenced her phone for the 10th time that hour. "Your company can survive without me for a few days. Can it? If it can't, then I built it wrong." He didn't argue, but she could see the worry in his eyes, the fear that she was sacrificing too much, that eventually she'd resent him for it. "Marcus." She waited until he looked at her. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to wake up one morning and decide this was a mistake. I know what I want. For the first time in my life, I actually know." "What do you want?" "This." She gestured at the hospital room at Sophie coloring in bed at the machines that had kept her alive. "This messy, terrifying real thing, whatever it looks like. It's not going to be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." Sophie looked up from her coloring book. "Are you two going to kiss because that's gross?" Marcus laughed. "We're not going to kiss." "Good, because I'm trying to color and I don't want to throw up." Victoria sat down on the edge of Sophie's bed. "What are you drawing?" "A heart." Sophie held up the paper. "But not a regular heart. A fixed heart, with a bandage on it. See?" The drawing showed a heart, bright red, slightly lopsided, with a band-aid across the middle. Around it, Sophie had drawn 3 stick figures: a tall one, a medium one, and a small one. "Who are these people?" Victoria asked, though she already knew. "That's Daddy. That's you. That's me." Sophie pointed to each figure in turn. "We're a family. We fixed the heart together." Victoria couldn't speak. She just sat there holding the drawing, feeling something crack open in her chest. "Can I keep this?" she finally managed. "Yeah, I made it for you." Sophie went back to her coloring, already working on a new picture. "Because you have a cracked heart too, I can tell. But Daddy and me are going to fix it." Marcus caught Victoria's eye across the bed. Neither of them said anything. Neither of them needed to. Sophie was released from the hospital 2 weeks later. The doctors were amazed at her progress. Dr. Chen called it one of the best outcomes he'd ever seen. Victoria arranged for a car to take them home, a real car, not an Uber, with a driver who'd been screened and vetted and given strict instructions to drive carefully. "This is fancy," Sophie said, climbing into the back seat. "Is this your car, Miss Victoria?" "It's just a car. It has seats that warm up, and a TV." "Don't touch that," Marcus started, but Sophie had already found the remote. Victoria smiled. "Let her watch whatever she wants." They drove to Marcus's apartment. It was small. Victoria had seen it for the first time a few days ago, when she'd stopped by to pick up some of Sophie's things. One bedroom, a tiny kitchen, walls so thin you could hear the neighbors talking. She hadn't said anything about it. Hadn't offered to buy them a better place, or pay off his debts, or fix everything with money. She'd just picked up Sophie's favorite stuffed animal and brought it to the hospital. But she'd been thinking about it, about how to help without taking over, about how to be part of their lives without trying to control them. "You're being quiet," Marcus said as the car pulled up to his building. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About what comes next." He nodded. "We should talk about that." "We should." But not now. Now Sophie needed to get settled, needed to sleep in her own bed, surrounded by her own things, feeling safe and loved and home. They carried her upstairs, Marcus doing the heavy lifting, Victoria following with bags of medication and instructions from the doctors. Sophie was asleep by the time they got to the apartment, worn out from the excitement of leaving the hospital. Marcus tucked her into bed. Victoria watched from the doorway. "She looks peaceful," she said. "First time in weeks." He kissed Sophie's forehead, then stood up. She missed her room, kept asking about her drawings on the wall. "She draws a lot. It's how she processes things. The doctors said it's good for her. Helps her make sense of a world that doesn't always make sense." They moved to the living room. It was barely bigger than a closet, a futon that served as Marcus's bed, a small TV, a coffee table covered in medical bills. Victoria sat down on the futon. "We need to talk about those." "The bills?" Marcus shook his head. "That's not your problem. It's our problem. If we're going to do this, whatever this is, then your problems are my problems." "Victoria, I'm not trying to take over. I'm not trying to buy you. She paused, trying to find the right words. "I have more money than I could ever spend, and you have a daughter who needs things I can provide. Let me provide them." "It feels like charity." "It's not charity. It's love." She met his eyes. "When you love someone, you help them. You share what you have. You make their life easier if you can. That's not charity. That's just caring." Marcus was quiet for a long time. He sat down beside her on the futon, his shoulder touching hers. "I've been on my own for 6 years," he said. "Since Elena died. I've done everything myself, made every decision, carried every burden. It's hard for me to let someone else in." "I know. But I want to try. With you." He turned to look at her. "I don't know how this works. Don't know how we fit our lives together. You're a CEO. I'm a mechanic. Those worlds don't usually overlap." They did. They do. Do they? Or are we just pretending? Playing house until reality catches up. Victoria reached over and took his hand. Do you remember what you said to me that first day when I asked if you could fix my engine? I said deal. You said deal, without hesitation, without knowing what you were agreeing to. You just committed. She squeezed his hand. That's what I'm doing now. I'm saying deal. To all of it. The complications, the challenges, the people who'll say we don't belong together. Deal. Marcus was quiet. Then he smiled that quiet, steady smile she'd come to love. Deal, he said. It was the simplest word in the world, but it meant everything. The next few weeks were an adjustment. For all of them. Victoria started coming over in the evenings after work. She'd bring dinner, nothing fancy, just food from the Thai place Marcus liked, or the Italian restaurant Sophie couldn't stop talking about. They'd eat together at the tiny kitchen table, Sophie chattering about her day, Marcus listening with that patient attention he gave to everything. Victoria learned to fit into their rhythms. Learned that Sophie needed her medication at exactly 7 p.m., no exceptions. Learned that Marcus read to her every night before bed, even when he was exhausted. Learned that their life was structured around Sophie's needs, and that structure was sacred. You don't have to stay every night, Marcus said one evening after Sophie had fallen asleep. Do you want me to go? No, I just don't want you to feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. I feel... She searched for the word. Home. For the first time in my life, I feel home. Marcus pulled her close. They sat on the futon in the dark, listening to Sophie breathe through the thin walls. I need to tell you something, Victoria said. Okay. I'm resigning from Hayes Maritime. Marcus pulled back to look at her. What? I've been thinking about it since the hospital. About what matters. About what I want my life to look like. She met his eyes. The company was my father's dream. Not mine. I've been living his life chasing his goals, trying to be someone he'd be proud of. But I don't want that anymore. What do you want? To build something that matters. Something that helps people. Something that makes a difference. She paused. I have an idea. I've been working on it for weeks. I wanted to wait until I was sure. Tell me. So she did. She told him about Anchor Academy, a training center for people who needed second chances. Ex-convicts, single parents, kids who dropped out of school. Anyone willing to work hard and learn a trade. She told him about the warehouse space she'd found in a low-income neighborhood. About the curriculum she'd designed, focused on practical skills, marine mechanics, boat repair, engine maintenance. She told him she wanted him to run it with her. Marcus listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. You want me to teach? I want you to help people the way you helped me. You have a gift, Marcus. You understand machines, yes, but you also understand people. You know how to meet them where they are, how to make them feel capable instead of stupid, how to build them up instead of tearing them down. I'm just a mechanic. You're the best person I've ever known. She took his hand. Will you do this with me? Build something together. He looked at her in the dim light of the apartment. At this woman who'd thrown champagne at his feet, who'd mocked him in front of his colleagues, who'd denied their relationship on national television. At this woman who'd also saved his daughter's life, who'd sat with him through the worst night of his existence, who'd come back when she could have stayed away. Yeah, he said. I'll do it with you. Victoria smiled. It was the first real smile she'd given in years. Deal, she said. Deal. They sealed it with a kiss, quiet, gentle, full of promise. The first of many. Through the wall, Sophie stirred in her sleep. Daddy, Miss Victoria. We're here, sweetheart, Marcus called back. Go back to sleep. Okay, love you. Love you too. Victoria's heart swelled. Such simple words, such enormous weight. I love you too, Sophie. she said, loud enough for the little girl to hear. There was a pause, then sleepily, "I know. Good night, Miss Victoria." "Good night." They sat in the dark, listening to Sophie's breathing settle back into sleep. "This is real," Victoria said, almost to herself. "This is actually happening." Scared? Terrified. "Good." Marcus pulled her closer. "You can't be brave if you're not terrified first." Elena used to say that. She did, and she was right. He kissed the top of her head. "We're all scared. We all have broken hearts. The trick is finding people who will help you carry the pieces." Victoria closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't see darkness when she did. She saw light. She saw possibility. She saw a future worth fighting for. She saw home. Victoria resigned from Hayes Maritime on a Tuesday morning in March. She'd spent 3 weeks preparing. 3 weeks of meetings with lawyers, accountants, succession planners. 3 weeks of making sure the company her father built would survive without her. The board was stunned. "This is insane," Richard Moss said, standing in her office as she packed the last of her personal belongings. "You're walking away from everything. Your father's legacy, your career, everything you've worked for." "I'm not walking away from anything that matters. Hayes Maritime is worth $4 billion. You own 32% of it. You're telling me that doesn't matter?" Victoria looked around the office. The same walls she'd stared at for 10 years. The same view of the harbor. The same desk where she'd made decisions that affected thousands of lives. "It mattered," she said. "It doesn't anymore." "What are you going to do? Open what did you call it, a trade school? Anchor Academy." "And yes." Moss shook his head. "You've lost your mind. That man has corrupted you. That mechanic and his sick daughter have... Be very careful how you finish that sentence." Something in Victoria's voice made Moss stop. He'd known her for 15 years, had watched her destroy competitors, fire executives, negotiate deals that would have broken lesser people. He'd never seen her look the way she looked now. Not angry, not cold, just absolutely certain. "I'm not going to argue with you," Victoria said. "I'm not going to justify my choices. You want to know why I'm leaving? Because I spent 10 years building something that made me rich and miserable. Now I want to build something that makes me poor and happy." "You won't be happy. Not really. The money will run out, the romance will fade, and you'll be stuck in some warehouse with people who can't even... Get out." "Victoria, get out of my office, get out of my building, and don't ever talk about my family again." Moss stared at her. Then he turned and walked out without another word. Victoria finished packing. There wasn't much, some photos, a few books, the spark plug from the Sovereign's engine that she'd kept as a reminder. She put it all in a cardboard box and walked out of Hayes Maritime for the last time. Her assistant was waiting by the elevator. "Ms. Hayes, what should I do with the rest of your things?" "Donate them, or throw them away. I don't care." "Are you sure about this?" "Everyone's saying..." "I know what everyone's saying, and I don't care about that either." Victoria pressed the elevator button. "Find yourself a good job, Sarah. You deserve better than this place." The doors opened. Victoria stepped inside. "Ms. Hayes," Sarah called. "For what it's worth." "I think you're brave." Victoria smiled. "I'm not brave. I'm just finally doing what I should have done years ago." The doors closed, and Victoria Hayes, former CEO of Hayes Maritime, rode the elevator down to the lobby and walked out into the Miami sunshine. Marcus was waiting for her in the parking lot. "How did it go?" "Moss called me insane, said you corrupted me." "Did I?" "Absolutely." She kissed him, right there in the parking lot in front of anyone who might be watching. "You corrupted me into being happy. Unforgivable." He laughed. "Come on, Sophie's waiting. She made you a resignation card." A resignation card. She says it's like a birthday card, but for quitting. She drew a picture of you throwing papers in the air. Victoria laughed. It felt good. Everything felt good now. They drove to the warehouse in East LA. It was enormous, 40,000 square feet of empty space that had once been a boat manufacturing facility. The previous owners had gone bankrupt. Victoria had bought it for a fraction of what it was worth. Sophie was sitting on a folding chair in the middle of the empty floor, her legs swinging. When she saw Victoria, she jumped up and ran over. "Did you quit? Did you really quit?" "I really quit." "Yes." Sophie pumped her fist in the air. "Now you can be here all the time, with me and Daddy." "That's the plan." Sophie thrust a piece of paper into Victoria's hands. "I made you this." It was a card folded in half. On the front, Sophie had drawn a woman with yellow hair throwing papers into the air. Above her, in crooked letters, it said, "Congratulations on quitting." Victoria opened it. Inside, Sophie had written, "Now you can be happy. Love, Sophie. P.S. Can we get a dog now?" Victoria laughed so hard she cried. "Is it okay?" Sophie asked, suddenly worried. "I didn't know how to spell congratulations." "It's perfect." Victoria knelt down and hugged her. "It's the best card anyone's ever given me." Sophie beamed. "Daddy helped with the spelling, but he got it wrong too." "I did not," Marcus protested. "You put a D in congratulations." "There's a D in congratulations. Not in the middle." Victoria watched them argue, her heart so full it hurt. This was her family now. This messy, imperfect, beautiful family that she'd never expected to find. "Come on," she said, standing up. "Let me show you both what I'm thinking." She walked them through the warehouse, pointing out where things would go. The main workshop here. The classroom space there. Tool stations along this wall. A break room in the back with a kitchen so students could have a hot meal during long training days. "What about offices?" Marcus asked. "Small ones. In the corner. We don't need anything fancy." "And the students? How many are we talking?" 20 to start, then 50, then 100 if we can get the funding." Victoria turned to face him. "I want to help everyone I can. Ex-convicts who can't find work, single parents who need flexible hours, kids who dropped out of school and don't have any skills, anyone who needs a second chance." "That's a lot of people." "It's a lot of need, but we can make a difference, one person at a time." Sophie tugged on Victoria's sleeve. "What about me? What do I do?" "You," Victoria said, kneeling down. "Have the most important job of all." "What is it?" "You're going to be our official greeter. When new students come in, you're going to welcome them. Make them feel like they belong." "Can you do that?" Sophie nodded seriously. "I can do that. I'm good at making people feel better." "Yes, you are. The best." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the warehouse making plans. Marcus sketched out layouts for the workshop. Victoria called contractors about renovations. Sophie drew pictures of what the finished building would look like. By sunset, they were exhausted but happy. 6 months, Victoria said as they locked up for the night. "That's my goal. Open in 6 months." "That's ambitious." "I'm an ambitious person. Haven't you noticed?" Marcus smiled. "I've noticed." They drove home to the new apartment Victoria had found for them. It was bigger than Marcus's old place, but not extravagant. 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with actual counter space, a small yard where Sophie could play. Victoria had offered to buy a house. Marcus had said no. "I don't want to live in a mansion," he'd told her. "I want to live somewhere that feels like home." So they'd compromised. A nice apartment in a good neighborhood close to Sophie's school and the hospital. Affordable enough that Marcus didn't feel like a kept man. Comfortable enough that Sophie had room to run around. It was perfect. The 6 months flew by. Victoria threw herself into the project with the same intensity she'd brought to Hayes Maritime. But this time, it felt different. This time, she wasn't fighting for market share or shareholder value. She was fighting for something that mattered. She hired contractors, ordered equipment, wrote grant applications, called every donor she knew, every foundation that might be interested, every corporation looking for a good cause to support. Marcus built the curriculum. He spent weeks designing courses that would teach practical skills: engine repair, electrical systems, welding, fabrication. He wanted students to leave with real knowledge, the kind that could get them jobs, start careers, change lives. Sophie helped too. She came to the warehouse after school, did her homework in the corner, then wandered around talking to the construction workers. By the end of the second month, she knew everyone's name. "That's Miguel," she told Victoria one afternoon. "He has 3 kids, and that's Dave. He used to be in the army. And that's Rosa. She makes the best sandwiches. You know everyone." "I like people." Sophie shrugged. "People are interesting." Victoria thought about herself at 6 years old. She'd been taught to be suspicious of people, to assume they wanted something, to keep her guard up at all times. Sophie was different. Sophie saw the best in everyone, and maybe that was because she'd been through so much that she understood how precious connection was. Or maybe it was just who she was. Either way, Victoria wanted to protect that, wanted to make sure Sophie never lost her faith in people. The grand opening was scheduled for September 15th. Victoria woke up that morning with her stomach in knots. She'd given presentations to rooms full of hostile investors. She'd negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. None of it had made her as nervous as this. "You're going to be great," Marcus said, handing her a cup of coffee. "What if nobody comes?" 23 people have already enrolled. You know that. What if they don't like it? What if the curriculum is wrong? What if... Victoria. He put his hands on her shoulders. "Stop. Breathe. This is going to work." "How do you know?" "Because you built it, and you don't build things that fail." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that all the work, all the sacrifice, all the risk would pay off. But she wouldn't know until she walked through those doors. The warehouse looked different now. The empty concrete had been transformed into a state-of-the-art training facility. Workstations lined the walls, each one equipped with the tools students would need. Engines sat on lifts ready to be taken apart and put back together. Boats in various states of repair filled the center of the space. Above the main entrance, someone had welded a metal sign. It said, "Anchor Academy. Fix boats. Fix lives." Victoria had cried when she first saw it. Marcus pretended not to notice. The students arrived at 8 a.m., 23 of them. Men and women of all ages, all backgrounds, all stories. There was James, 52, who'd just been released from prison after serving 15 years for robbery. He'd applied because he had nowhere else to go. There was Maria, 38, a single mother of 4, who'd lost her job when the factory closed. She'd applied because she needed to feed her kids. There was Devin, 19, who'd dropped out of high school to take care of his dying mother. She'd passed 6 months ago. He'd applied because he wanted to make her proud. Each of them had a story. Each of them had struggles. Each of them had come to Anchor Academy because someone had told them they could have a second chance. Victoria stood at the front of the room, looking at their faces. Some were hopeful, some were skeptical, some were terrified. She understood all of it. "Good morning," she said. "My name is Victoria Hayes, and I want to tell you something that nobody told me when I was starting out." She paused. The room was silent. "I want to tell you that it's okay to be broken. It's okay to have made mistakes. It's okay to feel like the world has given up on you." She looked at each of them in turn. "Because the world is wrong. You are not your worst moment. You are not your biggest failure. You are not the sum of everything that's gone wrong in your life." James shifted in his seat. Maria wiped at her eyes. "This is a place for second chances. But I want you to understand what that means. It doesn't mean we're going to fix you. It doesn't mean we have all the answers. It means we're going to work alongside you, learn with you, fall down, and get back up with you. She gestured to Marcus, who was standing at the back of the room. "This is Marcus Webb. He's going to be your lead instructor. He used to build rockets for NASA. Then life happened and he had to start over. He knows what it's like to lose everything and rebuild from scratch." Marcus nodded. "I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be hard work. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to want to quit. Some of you might actually quit. But if you stay, if you put in the time and the effort, you'll leave here with skills that can change your life." A hand went up. "James, what kind of jobs can we get?" "After this, good ones," Marcus said. "Marine mechanics are in high demand. Boat repair, yacht maintenance, engine work, there's more need than there are people to fill it. Starting salary is 50 to 60,000. More if you specialize." Murmurs rippled through the room. For people who'd been scraping by on minimum wage, or no wage at all, $60,000 was life-changing. "But money isn't the point," Victoria added. "The point is dignity. The point is having something you're good at. Something you can be proud of. Something nobody can take away from you." She looked at Marcus. He nodded. "Let's get to work." The first year was hard. Harder than Victoria had expected. Harder than anything she'd done at Hayes Maritime. There were funding crises, grants that fell through donors who backed out months when she wasn't sure they'd be able to keep the lights on. There were student struggles. James relapsed twice before getting clean for good. Maria almost dropped out when her childcare fell through. Devin got in a fight and nearly got expelled. There were personal challenges. Sophie had a health scare that sent them back to the hospital for 3 terrifying days. Victoria's mother stopped speaking to her entirely. The tabloids ran a story calling Anchor Academy a vanity project and a tax shelter. But there were victories too. James finished the program and got a job at a marina in Fort Lauderdale. On his last day, he hugged Victoria so hard he lifted her off the ground. "You saved my life," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Nobody ever believed in me before. Nobody." Maria graduated top of her class. She now runs her own small boat repair business and employs 3 other Anchor Academy graduates. Devin got his GED while in the program. He's currently enrolled in community college studying engineering. He wants to work for NASA someday. Like Marcus did, he says, before he became even cooler. 1 year after opening Anchor Academy, had graduated 47 students. 43 of them had found jobs. 38 were still employed 6 months later. The numbers were better than any workforce development program in the state. But the numbers weren't what mattered to Victoria. What mattered was watching someone who'd given up on themselves start to believe again. What mattered was seeing the moment when a skill clicked, when understanding dawned, when a person realized they were capable of more than they'd ever imagined. What mattered was Sophie running through the workshop, high-fiving students, making everyone smile. What mattered was Marcus patient and steady, teaching people to build things with their hands the same way he'd taught himself to rebuild his life. What mattered was feeling for the first time ever like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The 1-year anniversary fell on a Saturday. Victoria planned a celebration. Nothing too fancy, just a party at the warehouse for students past and present. Donors, local business owners who'd supported them. Barbecue from the place down the street. Music from a local band that one of the graduates had recommended. Sophie insisted on decorations. She spent 3 days making paper anchors and hearts, stringing them together into garlands that hung from the rafters. "It looks like a craft store exploded," Marcus observed. "It looks beautiful," Sophie corrected. "It looks like love." She wasn't wrong. The guests started arriving around noon. James came with his girlfriend, someone he'd met at a recovery meeting. Maria brought her kids, who immediately started running around the workshop, fascinated by the engines and tools. Devin showed up in a suit and tie, looking like a different person than the angry teenager who'd walked through their doors a year ago. "Nice outfit," Victoria said. "I have a date later," he grinned. "Figured I'd dress up." "A date with who?" A girl from my chemistry class. She's smart, smarter than me. I like that. Victoria laughed. Good for you, Devin. Good for you. By mid-afternoon, the warehouse was packed. People eating, laughing, telling stories. The band played something upbeat. Someone started dancing. Victoria stood at the edge of it all watching. A year ago, this space had been empty concrete. Now, it was full of life, full of second chances, full of proof that broken things could be made whole again. Marcus found her in the crowd. You okay? More than okay. Nervous? She looked at him. About what? He just smiled. Come with me. He took her hand and led her to the front of the workshop. Someone must have given a signal because the music stopped. The crowd turned to face them. What's going on? Victoria whispered. You'll see. Marcus cleared his throat. Can I have everyone's attention? The room went quiet. Sophie appeared at Victoria's side, taking her hand. 1 year ago, Marcus said, this place was just an idea, a dream that Victoria had, a crazy, impossible dream that nobody thought would work. A few laughs from the crowd. Victoria felt her face getting hot. But she made it work. Not because she had money, though, that helped. More laughter. But because she believed. She believed that people deserve second chances. She believed that broken things can be fixed. She believed in all of us when we didn't believe in ourselves. He turned to face Victoria. His eyes were bright. I met Victoria on one of the worst days of her life. Her fancy yacht had broken down, and she was standing on a dock yelling at anyone who'd listen. She was angry, scared, completely out of her element. Victoria groaned. Do you have to tell this story? Yes, because it's important. He smiled. She looked at me, this guy in a dirty uniform with grease on his hands, and she said, fix this engine and I'll marry you. Deal. The crowd murmured. Someone laughed. I said deal, not because I thought she was serious, but because I could see something in her eyes, something real, something worth saving. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It glinted in the afternoon light. Victoria's breath caught. I've been carrying this around for 3 months, Marcus said, waiting for the right moment. And I realize there's never going to be a perfect moment. There's only this moment, right now, with all these people who love us, who we've helped, who've helped us. He opened his hand. On his palm sat a ring, simple silver shaped like an anchor. Victoria Hayes, former CEO of Hayes Maritime, current director of Anchor Academy. Love of my life. He smiled. Will you marry me? The room was silent. Every eye was on Victoria. She looked at the ring, at Marcus, at Sophie, who was bouncing on her toes with barely contained excitement. You know I hate surprises, Victoria said. I know. You know I'm terrible at emotions. I know that too. You know I'll probably drive you crazy for the rest of your life. I'm counting on it. Victoria laughed. It came out as half a sob. Yes, she said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The room erupted, cheering, clapping, someone crying in the back. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was kissing her, and nothing else existed except this moment. Wait, Sophie shouted. Wait, wait, wait. They pulled apart. Sophie was holding something behind her back. I have one too, she said. For you, Daddy. She held out her hand. On her palm sat another ring. A matching anchor, slightly larger. Victoria helped me pick it, Sophie said proudly. We've been planning this for weeks. She said you'd never expect it if I gave you the ring, because I can't keep secrets. You kept this secret, Marcus said, his voice rough. It was so hard. Sophie bounced. I almost told you like 1,000,000 times, but Victoria said if I kept the secret, I could get a dog. So. The crowd laughed. Marcus laughed. Victoria laughed. Can I? Sophie asked. Marcus knelt down to her level. Yeah, sweetheart. You can. Sophie took his hand suddenly serious. Daddy, you're the best daddy in the whole world, and I want you to marry Victoria. Because she makes you happy. And she makes me happy. And I think Mommy would be happy too. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. He couldn't speak. Sophie slid the ring onto his finger. Then she threw her arms around both of them, and they stood there, the three of them holding each other, while everyone watched. Are we a family now? Sophie asked, her voice muffled against Victoria's shoulder. We've been a family for a while, Marcus managed. We're just making it official. Finally, Sophie said. Now can we talk about the dog? The party continued until well after dark. Victoria danced with Marcus under the string lights Sophie had insisted on. She danced with James, who stepped on her feet 3 times and apologized profusely. She danced with Devon, who turned out to be surprisingly good. Where did you learn to dance? She asked. YouTube, he admitted. I'm trying to impress the chemistry girl. She's a lucky woman. I'm the lucky one. Sophie fell asleep around 9 p.m., curled up on a pile of moving blankets in the corner. Someone had draped a jacket over her. Her face was peaceful. Victoria sat down beside her, watching her breathe. This child who'd been through so much, who'd fought so hard, who'd taught Victoria more about love in 2 years than she'd learned in a lifetime. Marcus sat down next to her. What are you thinking about? Everything. Nothing. She leaned against him. I keep waiting to wake up, to find out this was all a dream. It's not a dream. I know, but it feels like one. The good kind. She looked at the ring on her finger. I never thought I'd have this. Any of this. Family, purpose, love. You built it. You deserve it. I didn't build it alone. She took his hand. I couldn't have built it alone. They sat in silence for a while, watching the party wind down. People saying goodbye, hugging, promising to stay in touch. What now? Marcus asked. What do you mean? We've got the academy. We've got each other. Sophie's healthy. Things are good. He paused. So, what's next? What's the next mountain to climb? Victoria thought about it. She'd spent her whole life climbing mountains, proving herself, conquering challenges, always moving, always striving, never resting. But sitting here in this warehouse they'd built together with this man she loved and this child she'd come to think of as her own, she didn't feel the need to climb anything. I don't know, she said. And for the first time, I don't need to know. I'm just happy. Here. Now. Marcus smiled. That's a big change for you. Everything's changed. Everything. She looked around at the workshop, at the tools and engines and boats, at the sign above the door that said Fix Boats, Fix Lives. I used to think I had to have all the answers, had to control everything, had to be 10 steps ahead at all times. And now? Now I just want to be here, present. With you and Sophie, helping people, building something that matters. She squeezed his hand. That's enough. More than enough. Sophie stirred in her sleep. Daddy, Miss Victoria. We're here, sweetheart. Are we going home? Soon, just a little longer. Sophie opened her eyes, looked at them and smiled. Okay, I love you. We love you too, baby. Sophie closed her eyes again and was asleep within seconds. They locked up the warehouse together just before midnight. Marcus carrying Sophie, Victoria carrying the leftover food. The sign above the door glowed in the moonlight. 1 year, Victoria said. 1 year since we opened. And many more to come. Many more. They walked to the car. Sophie murmured something in her sleep about dogs and boats and birthday cake. Marcus laughed softly. She's never going to stop asking about the dog, you know. I know, Victoria smiled. Maybe we should just get her one. You're going to spoil her. Absolutely. That's my job now. Spoiling her and loving her and making sure she never forgets how special she is. Marcus stopped walking, looked at her. Thank you. For what? For coming back. That night at the hospital. You could have stayed away, could have pretended none of it mattered, but you came back. I couldn't stay away. I tried. Believe me, I tried. She touched his face. But you and Sophie, you'd already changed me. I just hadn't realized it yet. When did you realize? When I was standing at that press conference, saying all those lies, denying everything we had. She shook her head. I knew in that moment that I was making the biggest mistake of my life, but I made it anyway because I was scared. And now I'm still scared. But I'm not going to let fear make my choices anymore. She kissed him softly. I'm going to let love make them instead. They drove home through the quiet Miami streets. Sophie asleep in the back seat, Marcus's hand on Victoria's knee, the radio playing something soft. Victoria watched the city pass by outside her window. The lights, the palm trees, the ocean glittering in the distance. This city she'd lived in for years, but never really seen. Never really loved. She loved it now. Loved all of it. Because love wasn't about places or things. It was about people. It was about showing up day after day, even when it was hard. Even when you were scared. Even when you didn't know what came next. They pulled into the driveway of their apartment complex. Marcus lifted Sophie out of the car, and Victoria grabbed the bags from the trunk. Home, Sophie mumbled, still half asleep. Home, Marcus agreed. Home, Victoria echoed. Such a simple word. Such an enormous meaning. They walked inside together, the three of them, and the door closed behind them. Outside, the Miami night was warm and still. The stars were hidden behind clouds. The city hummed with a million lives, a million stories, a million people trying to find their way. But in that small apartment, in that ordinary building, in that unremarkable corner of the city, something extraordinary had taken root. A family. Built not from blood, but from choice. Not from obligation, but from love. Not from perfection, but from the willingness to be broken together, and heal together, and grow together. Victoria had spent 42 years searching for something she couldn't name. Power, success, control, she'd chased them all thinking they would fill the emptiness inside her. They never did. But this messy, imperfect, beautiful life, this was enough. More than enough. This was everything. And as Victoria lay in bed that night, listening to Marcus breathe beside her, and Sophie snore softly in the next room, she finally understood what her father had never learned. The point wasn't to win. The point wasn't to conquer. The point wasn't to build an empire that would outlast you. The point was to love and be loved. To help and be helped. To find your people and hold on to them with everything you had. The point was to fix what was broken in engines, in lives and hearts, and to keep fixing it day after day until it worked again. The point was to say, deal, when someone offered you a chance at something real, and to mean it. Victoria smiled in the darkness. She'd meant it. She still meant it. She would always mean it. And that was the only ending that mattered, not an ending at all, but a beginning, stretching out into a future full of possibilities, full of second chances, full of love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger than steel. Three people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided that broken things could be beautiful if you were willing to do the work. They were willing. They always would be.